Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Wednesday, February 23rd, and on episode 226 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, we're going to look all around Hokies sports, spending most of today's show on the men's basketball team, looking at how they can somehow find a way into the NCAA tournament field with 4 games remaining in the regular season and a trip to Brooklyn for the ACC tournament right around the corner. Then in the second half, we'll look at the women's hoops team with 2 games remaining before the ACC tournament, baseball's first weekend of the year, and softball's weekend down in Tuscaloosa. All of that and much more coming up on episode 226 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. Welcome into episode 226 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. However you are taking it in, live or archived, if you're listening on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Stitcher, or if you are in the YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn notifications on so you know when the TSL podcast goes live every week. And if you are in the live stream, be sure to drop a question or comment for David or Chris. We'll get to those with Nick at the end of the show. As always, the Tech Sideline Podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. You can help bring Olympic hopeful athletes to Blacksburg and continue to grow one of the best wrestling programs in the entire country. Visit southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. No Will Stewart on set today. He was here for the second half of the Brent Pry interview on Monday. So we've got David Cunningham across the way, managing editor of Tech Sideline, filling in. To my right, as always, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. In the fourth chair, making his triumphant return, it's Nick Brown. And behind the scenes, as always, Malcolm Stewart does a great job as our best podcast producer in the land. And I'm your host, Jake Lyman. Guys, for the first time in what seems like a while, it's not a happy podcast about men's basketball. A tough loss to North Carolina back on Saturday. And usually we'll start with talking about the games that have happened in the last week. But I think today we just need to have an overall conversation about how this team can still find a way into that field of 68 in a few weeks. Is it still possible if the Hokies slip up, or do they have to run the table and find their way to a few wins in Brooklyn? What does the Hokies' chances look like right now?
I think everybody would agree that they have to go at least 3-1 down the stretch.
Yeah.
2-2 won't cut it unless there's followed by like a deep ACC tournament run, very, very deep. So you're talking about winning 3 of the last 4. 3 of the last 4 games are on the road. Which on paper makes it more difficult, but at the same time, it's not like the ACC is filled with super heavyweights this year. I mean, there are plenty of winnable games out there.
And 3 of them, I should add, are against the top, like the bottom of the ACC.
Three of the teams the Hokies play would be playing on Tuesday in the ACC tournament right now.
Right. So that's good or bad, depending on your perspective, because Virginia Tech also needs quality wins. They don't have a quadrant 1 win. And their only opportunity in the regular season for a quadrant 1 win is against Miami on the road. And, Virginia Tech won down there last year in overtime. That was kind of an injury-riddled Miami team. And obviously Tech had a great chance to beat Miami this year were it not for a buzzer-beating half-court shot at the end. Obviously, it would be ideal to beat Miami. Go into the ACC tournament already with a quadrant 1 win. Because right now, like, the fact that Virginia Tech doesn't have a quadrant 1 win, that's if they're up against 3 or 4 other bubble teams for the last couple spots, in theory, I mean, yes, there's more to it than quadrant 1 wins, but that's the red circle on Virginia Tech's resume. That's the negative for them, is there's no quadrant 1 wins at all. So hopefully they will get an opportunity they will get an opportunity. Hopefully they can take advantage of their opportunity and pick one of those up.
Yeah, the thing is, 3 of your final 4 games are on the road. And for the most part, I mean, Tech slipped up at Boston College and at North Carolina, but for the most part, Tech's been all right on the road this year. Mm-hmm. Not great, not bad, just kind of average. But, like, you already beat Georgia Tech earlier this season. Last time you were in Clemson, you beat Clemson. Mm-hmm. And Tech, I don't know if Tech's ever lost to Clemson. I think Tech might be 2 or 3-0 against
Since
Clemson under Mike Young.
It was Mike Young's first game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we talked about going to get a cold drink.
Yeah, and then you got Miami, who you probably should have beaten or could have beaten in Castle this year. Then Louisville,
my game.
which is the one
Just
game,
beat Louisville.
which is
That's
the
my
one,
goal.
which is the one game at home.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and it's. I wrote about this yesterday. You know, Tech's two outside of the quadrant one, no quadrant one wins. Tech's blemishes on the resume are losses at home against NC State and at Boston College, and those are two teams, you know, somewhere between 10th and 15th in the rankings in the ACC standings right now. NC State's 13th. You lose to Clemson and Georgia Tech, they're both tied for 13th right now. I mean, those are bad losses. So, you know, if Tech had won those games, you know, you're looking at a team that is, you know, has 2 more wins, is 10-6 in the ACC, 18-9 overall. Instead, you lost to Boston College on the road. You lose at home to NC State, both 68-63, both 5-point games that you were leading with 5 minutes to go. You know, but Tech has played a lot better basketball as of late. The only question is, can it win enough games down the stretch? And like Chris said, you know, you're going to have to go at least 3-1. The one loss, I think, is okay if it's Miami because Miami's good, but you got to win the other 3 games, and then you hope you get a favorable seed in the ACC tournament, because if you don't, right now, Virginia Tech sitting on the 8 line would have to play Florida State in the first round and then play Duke if it wins. And that, I mean, I know Florida State's injury-riddled, but playing Duke in the second round of the tournament to try to get into the NCAA tournament, that doesn't seem like a way I would want to try to play.
And even Florida State being injury-riddled, their size, they're a tough matchup, and I know Tech beat them on the road last time, but like Tech shot like 70%
Tech
from
made
3-point range.
18 or 19 3-point.
So that's the reversal. The UNC game was the full circle from the Florida State. And when you have a game where you shoot as well as Tech did against Florida State, it's eventually going to be balanced out by a game where you can't make anything. And that was this past Saturday against North Carolina. I will say it's a good thing that the Miami game's on the road, because if it was at home, it wouldn't be a quadrant one opportunity.
And you talk about getting a favorable seed in the ACC tournament. Again, 8th seed doesn't seem very favorable, because even if you get by Florida State, you've got Duke the next day, and I want to say that might even lead off Thursday's
that's a
action.
noon game on Thursday, and the problem is, unless Duke has the head-to-head against pretty much everybody except for Miami and
UVA
and UVA, but UVA is not going to catch up. Miami, so like Notre Dame right now is second. So, you know, even if Duke loses and Notre Dame, Duke would have to lose more than, you know, basically they would have to drop below Notre Dame. So that's very unlikely. So, you know, whoever the 8 and 9 line is going to play Duke on the first day. Tech did go toe-to-toe with Duke for a good 25 minutes in Durham, but again, I mean, this is the best team in the conference.
And Virginia Tech, only a game back of Syracuse, who's on the 7 line right now, and Syracuse's last 4 games are currently against the 4 teams getting a double bye in the ACC tournament. They have, I believe, Notre Dame tonight, Duke on Saturday, UNC next week, and then finish off with Miami. So the Hokies an opportunity to surpass them, get to the 7 line, and here's what that trip to the championship would look like. Louisville or Clemson on Wednesday, Notre Dame on Thursday, a team the Hokies have already beaten, and then Miami on Friday to get to the championship, a team the Hokies were a half-court shot away from going to overtime with. Seems like if the Hokies are going to make a deep run in the ACC tournament, 7 line is exactly where they need to be.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, if you can, what was that first game? Either
Louisville or
Clemson.
You'd feel good about either one of those.
Yeah, and you guys would have, Tech would have just played both of them at the end of the season.
Exactly right, and already beaten Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's had a resurgent season under Mike Bray. I don't want to take anything away from Notre Dame.
But Tech matches up so well.
Yeah, and it's like the ACC is not very good, so the second best team in the ACC isn't anywhere close to what a normal second best team in the ACC is. Like Tech's Sweet 16 team from a few years ago would either win or finish second in the ACC this year. Mm-hmm. It would be Duke, Virginia Tech, and everybody else. And instead, I think Tech was the 5 seed in the ACC tournament that year.
Yeah.
They'd either be 1 or 2 this year. They're that far ahead of what everybody else.
That was and because that was that the year UVA won the national championship?
is.
It
Yeah,
was.
UVA won the national championship, and Duke had the
Zion.
Zion trio.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And North Carolina had a really good team.
And that was Florida State with Terrence
12
Mann and Devin Vassell was on that. He hit the shot in the ACC tournament.
I mean, just the
Stacked league.
ACC was stacked, and
Right.
now it's Duke and everybody else.
Yeah. So I'll go over the top 25 rankings now.
Yeah,
Well, hold
Might
on.
as
Well,
well.
but by the way, Duke plays UVA today at UVA.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
It's
So
a big day
that's
in the
a huge
ACC.
if.
Duke, UVA, Syracuse, Notre Dame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if Notre Dame beats Syracuse today and Duke loses, and they're tied for first.
Yeah,
Well,
but Duke
Duke's
has
got the head-to-head,
Duke has
but
the
still, I mean,
head-to-head.
they're tied in the.
So I'm going to go over the preseason top 25 AP poll in college basketball. And I'm going to go over the preseason top 25 teams that were on Virginia Tech's schedule this year. All right, so Duke, number 9. They've lived up to it.
They're right around the same spot
Yeah,
now.
Memphis, number 12. Not ranked. Horrible. By
That's
their
been
standards,
a
They
horrible.
did
crap
beat
show.
Houston.
They did beat Houston. North Carolina, number 19, not ranked. Florida State, number 20, not ranked, and in a downward spiral.
Just
They've
lost
like
by
7 of 8,
15
or something
to
like
Boston
that.
College.
Right. Number 21, Maryland, who fired their coach right after the Tech game and has a losing record. Number 23, St. Bonaventure, who was the most experienced team in the country after winning the A-10 last year. Extremely disappointing season for the Bonnies. Number 25, Virginia, who is outside the top 25. You know, good, decent
and is
team,
fighting for the bubble.
right, fighting on the bubble, right? And everybody would have projected them to be a clear-cut NCAA tournament team. So
That's 7.
that's a bunch of teams that. So what did I name? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opportunities for quadrant 1 wins.
Those would be quad 1 wins anywhere if they were top 25 teams.
Right? Yeah, because you assume they'd be top 30
Yes.
in the net. So, and as it turns out, none of them, except for
Duke
except for Duke.
Duke's quad 1, but yeah, that's
None of them.
about
And,
it.
and
Right.
Xavier wasn't even on the list, was it?
Xavier was in others receiving votes.
So Xavier was on there.
You expect, but we didn't even know if we were going to play Xavier. or
Yeah,
not
and
because, you know, it
that
a tournament.
was the second
right
day.
Right, and you also had Syracuse receiving votes.
Mm-hmm.
So you think that's a possibility, maybe that they'd be a quad 1 win.
Yeah.
Let me
So it's just all these teams I remember writing the article in the preseason and it was called "A Schedule Built for the NCAA Tournament" or for March Madness or something like that. And on paper, that's what it looked like it was. But as it turned out, it's not just the ACC that is disappointed. It's most of Tech's non-conference conference teams have disappointed too. Like I would have assumed Maryland and St. Bonaventure, both those teams Tech beat, and they were preseason top 25. You would assume they would be quad 1 wins. They weren't. They both had disappointing seasons. I guess St. Bonaventure's quad 2, and I don't know what
Maryland's a quadrant because it was at Maryland. It's a
Yeah.
quadrant 2 game, but
Right.
if it was anywhere else, it probably would have been a quadrant 3 game.
Right,
so.
right. Maryland, they've got a losing record.
Yep.
So it's just, and I'm not saying, you know, Virginia Tech has done some things. Virginia Tech should have beaten Xavier because Xavier had a weakened team that night.
Yep.
And Virginia Tech shouldn't have lost to Boston College. So there have been some things on Virginia Tech's end. It's partly our own issue here, but like at the same time,
Everybody else on Tech's schedule has just been atrocious.
Exactly. And it's hard to say why. I mean, you can point to the ACC having some older coaches and, you know, falling behind the Big Ten and the SEC in revenue, but how do you explain St. Bonaventure returning everybody from the A-10 title team and then falling flat?
Well, and that's 3 ranked teams in non-conference: St. Bonaventure, Memphis, and Maryland, who all have had extremely disappointing seasons for what was expected coming in. St. Bonaventure with 5 seniors starting, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maryland had made the NCAA tournament 6 out of 7 years, I believe. 6 out of the last 7 years under Mark Turgeon. And then just like that, he's fired and they're bad.
And then Memphis had 2 of the most electric freshmen coming in the entire country. It seemed like it was going to be an unbelievably tough non-conference schedule, and it may have been at the moment, but it has not.
The most
turned out
difficult
that way.
non-conference game Tech played might have been Dayton.
Yeah.
At Dayton, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's a game that Tech lost, and that's so. I mean that would have been a quadrant 1 win had
Yeah.
Tech won it, but I mean, it's crazy. I remember being at that game in Ohio in mid-December, and Tech at that point, it was like, okay, Tech's doing all right now, but this is a tune-up for St. Bonaventure and Duke, and Tech lost. But it was like, okay, Tech, St. Bonaventure or Dayton pressed for a lot of the game and forced Tech to turn the ball over. And then Tech came out and absolutely whooped St. Bonaventure. And it goes, all right, maybe Tech is back.
And they played well for 75% of the game against Duke in their next game. So you're like, okay, we're finally starting to play well. And then, bam, COVID hit.
Yeah.
Right, and canceled a bunch of games. And the first game back from COVID was NC State. And if the Tech's 3 COVID pauses dating back to last year show you anything, it is that, like, when you can't practice for 10 days or 2 weeks or thereabouts, you're probably going to lose that first game.
Yeah, and I think the most telling stat, Chris and I were talking about this before the show, about the ACC, and David Teal wrote a story about this. I encourage everybody to go read it. But this is going to be the first time, I don't know in how long, but a while, that Virginia Tech has, or the ACC has not had a ranked matchup in the regular season.
Right.
And that's really crazy to think when you look at all of the ACC teams that were either ranked or right outside the rankings in the preseason, that not a single matchup ended up being between ranked teams.
Right. So I remember, like, when Tech would make the ACC tournament under Greenberg, when they would miss the NCAA tournament under Greenberg, and fans would be like, "But we're in the ACC and we won 20 games, blah blah blah." Well, you could maybe make that argument back then, but you can't make that argument this year because the league is not good. It's behind, like, the Big East in the rankings.
Yeah. Providence top 10.
Yeah.
They're really good.
Yeah.
I was looking at bracketology updated yesterday, and last 4 in, you got Memphis. First 4 out, Dayton. Next 4 out is St. Bonaventure. Maryland, nowhere to be found. Syracuse, nowhere to be found. UVA is not even in the first 8 out.
UVA would be the 9th team out, according to Joe Lunardi, I believe.
Yeah, so, it's you talked about all those teams, and hardly any of them are tournament teams except, I guess, Duke.
Yeah, and obviously Virginia Tech had to handle business. And against some it did. Against St. Bonaventure, Maryland, it did. Against Xavier, Memphis, Dayton, it did not. But again, we all thought this was going to be the most challenging non-conference schedule Virginia Tech's ever played. And looking back, like, the tournament up in New York was tough, but everything else was kind of toss up.
If you think about it, the best team in that tournament was Iowa State, who won 2 games last year, and they've done an amazing job.
And they did fall off.
Yeah, they
fell
off
hard.
Right? Yeah,
but they were ranked at one point, which we looked at that tournament and said, okay, if Tech beats Memphis, they'll play Xavier. If they lose to Memphis, they'll play Iowa State. Right. And not the case. Iowa State won the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, and then even Xavier's dropped down to a 7 seed. I think they're up to at most a 3 seed or 4 seed at one point, and they went on a tear after that tournament. Once they got everybody healthy again, but then they hit Big East schedule and just flatlined. Now they're down to
the
7.
Big East is a tougher league.
Big East is.
I believe
really
they've got
good.
Providence tonight, who has been phenomenal this year.
Well, I don't know if you guys watched last night, but the UConn Villanova played last night, and that was a top 10, 15 game.
Yeah, Villanova's a 3
top
seed
20, I believe.
Yeah, UConn's a 5, so that's a 5 versus a 3 seed in bracketology.
Yeah, and just a really. You haven't seen those matchups in the ACC this year. Tonight against Duke UVA probably would have thought would have been one of those.
Before the season, this would be one of the premier matchups, and I guess technically speaking, it still is just a process of elimination.
Still the primetime game on ESPN.
Same with Tech UVA on Big Monday.
But you would think it would be like number 7 Duke versus number 16 UVA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same with Tech UVA on Big Monday last week.
Right.
There's a reason why North Carolina, Louisville on this Monday.
This Monday, you're like, oh man, what a great matchup. No.
Just.
Well, currently, Joe Lunardi, I mentioned he has UVA as the 9th team out.
Tech is the 10th team out. Yeah.
Right now, 3 Commonwealth teams, Virginia Tech, and VCU, are all back to back, according to Joe Lunardi. It's an uphill battle for the Hokies to get.
If VCU doesn't get in, that means the A-10 will only get 1 team in for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
So think about it. The Atlantic 10, which dominated the ACC in non-conference play.
2-7.
Right.
The ACC is 2-7. Yeah.
And they might only get 1 team in. So that team that dominated that league that dominated the ACC may only have 1 NCAA tournament team. That's how far that the ACC has fallen.
And there's a chance that it's St. Bonaventure who the Hokies blew out. And
it'll probably be Dayton.
It could be.
It'll probably be Davidson. My bad.
Davidson.
Because Davidson's the team that's dominated the A-10 all year. But it's it's interesting watching SEC basketball, watching Big Ten basketball. Arkansas, Florida was on last night. I watched a little bit of that. Michigan State, Iowa was on last night. And there are a couple.
You had Wabisa Beatty versus PJ Horn.
Texas A&M, Georgia, yeah.
Well, Florida, our old friend Colin Castleton put up 29 in a loss last
night.
Dude,
and what's hilarious is I don't know if you saw it, Appleby, who absolutely dominated Tech last year in the NCAA tournament. He hit the most ridiculous shot yesterday, and I'm just like, I have not seen any of that in ACC basketball this year.
I saw one. Miami made one from half court. It was pretty ridiculous.
Wow, that's a little different.
Yeah. Well, Tech has an uphill battle to make it as an at-large team. And you look at these 4 teams. We said Miami, if you're going to lose one, that's the one you have to lose. If Tech were to lose tonight against Georgia Tech, do you think that ends any shot at an at-large bid and Tech would have to run the table?
Probably, yeah. But you could still, if they did lose tonight, if they won their last 3 and one of those was a quad 1 win, you still look at it as a possibility. But so much of it depends on what other teams do.
Yes.
They're competing with UVA for an enlarged spot. So, if UVA struggles down the stretch, or I remember one year when Greenberg was here, and it looked like Tech was going to get in, and then there were so many upsets in the conference tournament that it knocked a lot of those teams that people thought were going to be automatic bids, knocked them back down to at-large teams, and that bumped Tech to the wrong side of the bubble. Yep. If there were fewer upsets in the conference tournaments this year, then maybe that could play to Tech's advantage.
I would not recommend losing to Georgia Tech.
I would not recommend.
I don't think. I mean, I sound like a doctor. I do not recommend taking this prescription, because if you take it, it's not going to end well. I mean, look, Virginia Tech just dominated Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago. It wasn't even close.
15-point game.
Michael DeVoe's
good. It wasn't even that close. DeVoe's really good, but man, as a team, their shot selection was horrible, and even when the quality of their shots, it's they take a shot and it's this flat trajectory and it just creams off the rim at 100 miles an hour. It's just a team with no talent except for DeVoe.
Even DeVoe pulls up from 5 feet behind the 3-point line all the time.
He can hit it though.
Yeah. This is a Georgia Tech team. I mean, same goes for Clemson, honestly. I mean, Georgia Tech and Clemson are not good teams. Louisville's talented. Louisville's really talented. Obviously lost Chris Mack, but this is a stretch here. At the beginning of the season, this is a stretch here where you would have said Virginia Tech can close out the season with 3 or 4 wins.
Mm-hmm. And we can.
And Tech still can. Right. But the problem is, if you lose now, it's really going to hurt you.
Yeah, you sit there and you assume, we're already probably in the tournament at that point, and now you're playing for seeding.
Yeah.
You just win 3 of these last
That's probably what
games.
you would have thought. That's probably what you would have thought at the beginning of the season.
Yep. I think coming out of that, 3 home games in 8 days
against Virginia, North Carolina, and Syracuse,
you feel like if you get a few wins there, that could cement your spot.
And Tech went 2-1.
They went 2-1 over that.
I think
if we said that before the season, I thought Tech was going to have at least 2 quadrant 1 wins before ACC play even started.
Yeah.
And then you got that stretch of 3 games in the road, 3 games in a row at home,
and likely 2 of them would have been quadrant 1 wins.
Yeah. So you're like, man, not only are we going to make the NCAA tournament, but we've got a chance over the course of the entire season to probably have 5 or 6 quadrant 1 wins, and we're going to be a 5 or a 6 seed.
And Tech's only played 6 games, and none of them have come at home.
Exactly.
And
we're going to finish this season without playing a quadrant 1 opponent at home.
Yeah. And Virginia lucks out a little bit just to roll the dice. Virginia gets Duke at home today.
Right.
Yes.
And Virginia already beat Duke and Cameron Indoor last week or 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And so Virginia
doesn't get
and if Virginia wins, that's 2 quadrant 1 wins, both against Duke.
Right.
So Virginia Tech doesn't have that, and that's just the way the dice rolls. But yeah, it's definitely been a strange season just for ACC hoops in general. And if you're Virginia Tech, you just gotta win, and you gotta hope that you get a favorable matchup in the ACC tournament,
and hope other bubble teams tank
lose
down the stretch.
Yeah.
A couple of bubble teams losing yesterday. Florida, Kansas State, San Diego State all going down. Obviously, Tech needs a big win tonight against Georgia Tech, but we have to talk about North Carolina on Saturday. We do have to go back and chat about that. Tech went cold, 5 of 26 from three-point range, and outside of Keve Aluma, 3 of 23 from beyond the arc.
Yeah, I spent all week thinking Virginia Tech was going to win the game. I thought they were going to win the game. And then I went down to PK's at 12:30 to watch Tottenham play Man City. Tottenham beat Man City. And I'm celebrating and everything. And then I'm like, wait a second. The sports gods are not going to give me wins over Manchester City and UNC, which are like my least favorite sports franchises. They're not going to give me wins over those two on the same day. And sure enough. I was sitting opposite the Tech bench in Section 13, and I remember being right behind that Justin Mutz three-point attempt that he took from the corner, and there was nobody within 20 feet of him. Mm-mm. I mean, he had so much time to just line it up, take the perfect shot and everything, and I was right behind his hand when he released it. I could tell as soon as it came out of his hand that it was going to be clank off the rim, ride left, and I could see it when the guys were releasing it that they weren't going to go in. And so I'm sitting up there groaning before the shots even get to the basket. You could just tell they weren't going to go in. And it's rare, like in basketball, where you put yourself in better positions than the other team to score and you lose the game. I mean, I thought Tech, like, as far as executing their offense, getting in the right positions, the positions you want to be in, I thought they outplayed North Carolina.
Yeah.
They just didn't make their shots.
Got a lot of open looks.
I think the perfect sequence that stands out in my head, or not the perfect sequence, maybe the perfect sequence if you're a UNC fan, but the sequence that stands out in my head is when Gassan drove and he had an open lane to the basket. And I think Bakat came over at the last second to help, but it was a wide open layup if he uses his right hand and just goes up strong. And he's bricked it off the backboard. UNC gets kind of a long rebound, and they push it out in transition, and they hit a really, really tough three-pointer, which I don't even think was a good quality shot. Right, and we had a guy right in their face. I mean, great, right on him, and he drilled it. So we miss an open layup on one end. They drill a tough contested three-pointer on the other end. And at that point, I think it was 22-16 Tech. If Gassan makes that shot, it's 24-16. But instead, it's 22-19.
Yep.
And at some point, you think, okay, they're going to start falling. The three-pointers are going to start falling. We can't continue to be this cold, but they did. And it's a shame that the bad shooting day came against UNC. But, when you have a shooting game like Tech had against Florida State earlier in the year where, I believe Padula was 6 of 7 and Couture was something like 9 of 11. 9 of 11. I mean, those guys are good shooters, but they're not that good. So you're going to have something's going to balance that out at some point. Like, if you're going to have a shooting game that good, chances are you're probably going to have one where you're really, really bad, too.
They were a combined 1 of 8 on Saturday.
Right.
And we talked about last week how even against UVA and Syracuse, Tech wasn't shooting the ball all that well in those games, but still finding a way to win. But when you shoot like that, you're not going to have a chance to beat a good team like North Carolina.
If you had told me that Tech would hold Carolina to 65 points, I would have said they're going to win the game. I mean, because Tech scored 68 on Carolina on the road.
Yeah.
Right? And Carolina, like 8 of Carolina's points were handed to them at the free throw line at the end of the game. So you're talking about Carolina maybe would have scored around 60, low 60s probably, if Tech hadn't had to foul, which is a really good defensive performance against Carolina. Mm-hmm. It's just, they couldn't hit the broadside of a bar. Sometimes, you can break down a game from an X's and O's standpoint and say, we could have done this better and that better, and we didn't close out this guy, and we weren't good coming off this type of screen, and that's why we lost. But nah, this is just flat out missing open shots. That's all it was.
And that's like after the game, Mike Young came in here. It feels like a while ago, but it was 5 days ago. But Mike Young came into the press conference room, kind of just shook his head. I mean, it's like, what can you say? You just guys just didn't make shots
next time, right?
I think it was Aaron McFarling of the Roanoke Times that asked, does it make it a little bit easier to like process knowing that is just like doing what you guys are usually doing, just not hitting? And Mike was kind of like, yeah, I mean, I guess like. And I think it's good that there wasn't anything like drastically wrong, but it's just frustrating, and that's 2 games in a row now where Tech's hit only 5 3-pointers in a game, And I think it's just a little bit of a shooting slump. But the good news is Tech played good defense pretty much the entire game.
And they've this is 7 games in a row where the defensive performances have been much better.
But to be able to make a run, you're going to have your offense on.
Yeah, and the problem is Tech didn't play well enough earlier in the season to leave themselves with much elbow room at this point. If Virginia Tech doesn't make the NCAA tournament, it's not going to be because they had a bad shooting day against North Carolina. It's going to be because they didn't beat a Xavier team that was missing 3 starters.
Yeah.
It's going to be because they lost to Boston College on the road and things like that. I think if like we said earlier, before the season, that 3-game stretch, we said, okay, you win 2 of those 3 games, that's fine. That's exactly what Tech did. If Tech doesn't make the NCAA tournament, it's going to be because of what they did earlier in the season, and maybe the fact that St. Bonaventure is in a top 50 team to count as a quad 1 win, like people thought they were.
Yeah, I think more so though it comes down to just not winning games. Mm-hmm. Tech had the Xavier game there at the end. Boston College, NC State, Tech was there. Not necessarily the teams in the top half of the ACC, but a win against Miami at home would have helped.
Well, in the Miami game, people look back and say, well, he had a half-court shot. Well, Tech was up 5 with, I want to say, a minute left in that game. Yeah. They could have won that before the half-court shot went in there.
There's just times, and it's time and time again, where Virginia Tech was up with a couple minutes to go at Virginia. Virginia Tech is up 4 with
3 minutes left and
3.5 minutes to go and didn't score again. I mean, it is just time and time again where just down the stretch, Virginia Tech didn't have it, and now it's coming back to bite them.
Yeah, exactly. And by playing so poorly at the end of games earlier in the season, they left themselves with no room to maneuver late in the season. So they don't have to be perfect from here on out, but. Or maybe they do have to be.
Maybe they do.
We don't know because we don't know what other bubble teams are going to do.
Yes.
But to go back to your point about North Carolina, I thought everything Virginia Tech ran. I mean, the Hokies got really good looks.
Yeah.
Like open corner threes that usually go down no matter who's shooting the ball because all 5 Tech starters can hit that shot.
Right.
Open shots that just didn't go down. Defensively, Tech was good, but I mean, Naheem Aline kind of described it best after the game. He was kind of joking, because somebody asked him, what did North Carolina do anything defensively that really, hurt you guys?
And they left him too open,
and
too much time to think.
Naheem was kind of smiled and was like, "No, I mean they couldn't guard us, but Tech just didn't hit shots, and sometimes that's just the way the ball bounces, and it's frustrating, but I think Tech played a better game.
I agree.
Just didn't hit shots, and sometimes that's just the way the game goes.
The biggest outline fact I think, besides the shooting, was I think UNC had 6 fouls with around 9 to 10 minutes to play in the second half, and Tech only shot 6 total free throws.
Tech didn't go to the line after they got in the bonus.
Did not.
And I don't. That's something to capitalize on, but in the end, that's not the deciding factor.
Right.
Because
anytime you shoot, what was it?
5 of 26.
And North Carolina ended up, if you take out the final minute, because North Carolina was 8 of 8 from the line when Tech was fouling in the final minute, North Carolina shot 7 free throws to Tech 6.
Right.
In the end, it's not that big of a difference.
It was a disparity in the box score because Carolina was winning and Tech had to start fouling.
Yeah.
So I thought the officiating was interesting, and you see this plenty of times in college basketball. Like Carolina got whistled for a foul like in the first minute of the game, and they didn't get whistled for their 3rd foul until there was less than a minute left in the half. So they basically played 18 to 19 minutes of basketball and committed 1 foul, which is physically impossible if you're actually playing hard, right? So you go into halftime and you're like, man, that fouls didn't seem to be very evenly distributed. Not that I expect them to be, but like I said, I think it's physically impossible to go that long without fouling in college basketball. But I'm sitting there thinking, man, we're down by 8 and Bacot hasn't even scored yet.
Yeah. That's the other thing. Virginia Tech defended Bacot really well. When they were in Chapel Hill, he hit all 6 of his first shots.
Yeah.
He went 6 for 6 to start the game and got North Carolina up early, and then Tech shut him down. This game, Tech shut him down from the get-go.
Yeah, they did. They did a really good job on him. And I thought the officiating balanced out in the second half because I looked up at one point in the second half and there was like 6 fouls on UNC and just 2 on Tech or something like that. So it balanced out in the end, and so it came down to who made shots, and Tech missed a bunch of wide open shots.
The Hokies forced 15 turnovers in the game, only allowed 6 second chance points.
Exactly. If you told me all those stats, 6 second chance points, 15 turnovers, holding Baycott to 10 points?
He had 12.
12 points. And holding Carolina to 65 points, I'm like, that's 7 in a row, boys. We're all feeling good, right?
And usually I don't like looking at plus minus on the stat sheet, but one stood out to me. Naheem Aline was a minus 17 in that game, which, I mean, again, there are a lot of factors that go into what happens when you're on the court, but that's Naheem Aline possibly just hasn't had the season I think a lot of people were expecting from him after the breakout performance in the NCAA tournament last year.
He is one of the streakiest shooters I've ever seen, and his streaks can last 6 weeks. Sometimes. And he just had a really good positive streak. Like, he played well and shot a much higher level during Virginia Tech's 6-game winning streak. So he was hot there for a couple of weeks, and then he kind of got unhot against North Carolina.
I think everybody did.
That's
true.
The
whole team
I mean,
did.
I was texting with a couple buddies over the weekend, and I mean, Hunter Couture over the last 5 games since that Florida State game, Hunter Couture has made like 30% of his 25-30% of his threes. Like, I think a lot there in different games, some guys have shot well and some guys haven't. But I think this was a game where it just all came together and everybody did not shoot well.
Exactly. And it wasn't just 3-point shooting. I mean, Mutt's got the ball down in the lane one-on-one against Manic on multiple occasions. Just couldn't finish shots that he normally finished.
Tech was 37% from the floor, too. So it wasn't just the 3-point shooting. It was just everybody could not get the ball through the basket. I guess you would call it a missed opportunity against North Carolina. That's a win you'd love to have, but not one that ends your season.
No, I mean, it would have been one that probably would have gotten Tech in the big conversation.
Yeah. Now, if you win that game, we're sitting here at 17-10 and play Georgia Tech tonight, a bad team, and you're like, man, this is going to be our 8th win in a row.
You're 9-7.
Right.
With 4 games left, 3 against the bottom half.
Exactly,
of the ACC.
and you feel really good about it. Now, if Virginia Tech wins tonight, you have to sit here and look at it and say, okay, we've won 7 out of our last 8. It sucks that we lost to North Carolina, but it's really, really hard to win 8 games in a row at the same time.
And I think that's the other thing. It's really hard to win 1 game in the ACC. It's hard to win a couple in a row. To win 6 in a row, that's impressive. I mean, I think the way Tech's turned it around, Tech deserves credit for turning it around. Yeah. Because, I mean, they were sitting at 2-7 in the ACC, dead last after that loss against Miami,
and after a full or a half-court buzzer beater. A lot of teams might mail it in at that point and just be like, all right, well, that's it.
And Tech turned around and ripped off 6 straight wins and now could go into Miami sitting in 7th or 8th in the ACC. Last time they met, Tech was dead last.
Yep. It's definitely going to be interesting tonight. Have to get a win against Georgia Tech. And then Miami, that could be the game that kind of shifts the scales, whether the Hokies end up in the tournament or out. And again, also trying to get to that 7 seed in the ACC tournament. We talked about how the path a little bit easier from the 7 than from the 8. I think it's about time to take our break here on episode 226 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Before that, let's check in with Nick in the 4th chair.
I know we're going to touch on women's teams and softball, baseball, and women's basketball. But I want to talk about some sports that don't get mentioned a lot. First off, lacrosse picked up their first ever win versus JMU. Who is ranked 13th. That's in school history. I think
JMU they won the national title a few years ago.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and Virginia Tech was 0-18 against JMU coming into the season and beat them on the road by 1 goal. Lacrosse is now ranked 20th in the country. They host Liberty today at 3. And then women's golf won their first ever tournament. So 4-day weekend in school history this February 13th. At the Columbia Classic. Again, they've only been around since 2015.
Right, very young.
But they beat number 2 Oklahoma State and number 24 Texas Tech in that tournament. Wow. And they now sit, which I think this is kind of... golf rankings are very specific and very weird, but they're ranked 26th in the country right now. But they also reached national championship last spring, didn't make it out of stroke play. into like the actual tournament. But it'll be a good season this season for the women, especially starting off that, and then they play this weekend at Florida State. So keep your eye on the newest team in the school right there. We'll rattle off. I think they have a good chance of getting the national championship again this season. Talking to some of them, but yeah,
Cool. Always good to beat the number 2 team in the country. We'll talk about another matchup with the number 2 team in the country that happened over the weekend for the Hokies. We'll dive into women's basketball, softball, baseball's 3-0 start this weekend against UNC Asheville. Just hop around Virginia Tech athletics in what was a busy weekend in Blacksburg. Stay with us here on episode 226 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We'll take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to episode 226 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We spent the first half of today's show going through the men's basketball team's hopes to try and get into the NCAA tournament. We'll spend the second half of the show whipping around looking at other Virginia Tech sports and their weekend, some good, some bad, and we'll see where the women's basketball team could possibly end up in the ACC and the NCAA tournament. We got David, Chris, Nick, Malcolm, and I'm Jake on set today. Again, make sure if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the YouTube chat. Nick will get to those at the end of the show. But let's dive in with women's basketball. A tough loss at Louisville on Sunday. Again, Louisville, number 3 team in the country, coming off a loss. They're not going to lose 2 games in a row very often. But maybe a missed opportunity for the Hokies to cement themselves as a possible host team in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Louisville team. You know, those top... It kind of shows the upper echelon of women's basketball. I mean, just how good NC State, Louisville, those teams are compared to the Stanfords, the Marylands, the really, really elite teams of college basketball. That's Louisville. They don't lose. You know, you're not going to lose 2 games in a row. They just lost over the weekend, and Virginia Tech's playing in front of 10,000 people in Louisville. And just didn't shoot well. I mean, Elizabeth Kitley played well.
Seemed to be the trend of the weekend.
Yeah, for Virginia Tech basketball in general. I mean, Liz Kitley played very well, but everybody else, I think she had 7 makes. Everybody else had 10 combined. So, I mean, just a tough weekend. And I don't know. That's a game, obviously, Virginia Tech wants to win, but missed opportunity. It's they're right now. We were just talking. They're a 6 seed right now in ESPN bracketology. That's pretty good.
That's very good.
And you win this weekend. You got Miami tomorrow, NC State at home on Sunday. NC State's number 3 in the country. You win, you got a chance.
And that would definitely be qualify as a top-tier win for Virginia Tech if they can take out the Wolfpack on Sunday. One good thing did come out of Sunday's game, though. Asia Shepard, I was talking with Chris Hyron. She scored in the final minute to become Virginia Tech's all-time scoring leader.
I asked Kenny Brooks about it after the game. He didn't know. Like, he said he didn't even realize. And, of course, she scored with, 35 seconds to go. And at that point, nobody's really paying attention.
It's a 20-point game.
Yeah.
It's on the road.
Yes.
Right.
So, and that was kind of one of those things where they said Hunter Couture didn't know that he could have broken the school record for threes. Yeah. If he was at home, he would have probably heard it over 100%. The PA.
But yeah, so of course that's going to be a big celebration before the game tomorrow. She's all-time leading scorer in program history now.
So all-time leading scorer in program history.
She passed
ACC record holder
for threes.
Probably retired the jersey.
I would think so.
Think so, yeah. And Elizabeth Kitley probably, when Kitley leaves, because Kitley is probably ACC Player of the Year this year, and she's going to be an All-American again before it's said and done.
And Kenny Brooks said at the beginning of the season, we're excited. We want Asia to break that record, but he told her she better enjoy it because it's probably getting taken down in the next few years with Elizabeth Kitley and Georgia Amore sitting right behind her. One of those things you probably wish they would have known and just told her not to shoot so she could get it to open up the Miami game.
I mean,
but the record's the same either way. Yeah. And again, we mentioned Hokies will take on Miami, a pretty solid team, middle of the pack in the ACC. Yeah. They're 9-7, but they've won 4 straight, including a win over Georgia Tech, a ranked team, back on Sunday. That's Thursday at 6 in Castle Coliseum. That's a game, could be a tricky one for the Hokies. One you feel like they should win, but also not one of the bottom tier teams like Syracuse that we saw the Hokies trounce back last week.
Yeah, Hokies put up 102 against Syracuse.
Carrier Dome record.
And this is
so few good things happen to Virginia Tech in the
Carrier Dome. Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, this is a Syracuse team that's gone through a lot. I mean, this is new head coach. They had a scandal and everything. But yeah, Virginia Tech demolished them. This is a Miami team that's okay. Like you said, middle in the pack. This is a game Virginia Tech needs to win, should win, should be like a 10-point game. I mean,
and a win there probably close to cements the Hokies as the 4 seed in the ACC tournament, gets them to double bye.
Yeah, and the Hokies need double bye goes a long way in the ACC tournament. I mean, them having to play on them starting their play on Friday instead of Thursday in Greensboro. 2 years ago, Tech was Tech was good, but Tech was about 5 or 6 in the 6th seed in the tournament and had to play. They played a Wake Forest team that was hot, and they lost. On Wednesday of the tournament, second round.
Yep.
It gives you an extra day to prepare. But I mean, this Virginia Tech team is really good. I think they beat Miami pretty easily. And it all comes down to NC State rematch on Sunday.
And they're sitting on the 6th line right now in the NCAA tournament, according to ESPN. Again, the top 4 seeds host. So I think that would be the goal for this team. You would think to make that happen, you have to beat NC State on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Top 5 team in the country. Hokies lost by 6 in Raleigh back in January. But this is a team the Hokies beat last year. They can do it again. And if they do, you'd think that puts them in that conversation for a top 4 seed.
Oh, yeah.
Quadrant 1 win.
Yeah, well, NC State's, I believe, like 3 or 4 in the net. And
Definitely a quadrant 1.
Right there next to Louisville. NC State, when Virginia Tech played them the first time, Tech didn't play very well. I mean, Tech turned the ball over a little bit. NC State got out in transition really easily. Tech probably played a good 15, 20 minutes of basketball. If Tech comes out at home and plays very, very well, this is going to be a game that Virginia Tech could easily win. I mean, I think Elizabeth Kitley beat out Elisa Cunane last time. That's a Player of the Year battle in the ACC right there. And this is a game that Virginia Tech, probably should win. I mean, you're playing at home.
There's going to be a lot of people there.
Yeah. Hopefully it's a good crowd.
6 p.m. on a Sunday.
It's senior day. This is a really good opportunity for Virginia Tech to show how good it is before it gets into the ACC tournament. And here's the other thing. You win on Sunday, you might have a chance to host an NCAA tournament regional. I mean, it means a lot more than just this, NC State game. But Tech NC State's developed a little bit of a rivalry
3
in the past
straight
couple years.
really close games.
Yeah.
Hokies beat them once last year, went to OT with them last year as well. So
I think parity in women's basketball has come a long way.
yes.
Still got a long way to go because, probably shouldn't be beating Syracuse by 50 on the road or whatever. But I remember when, when UConn was at their peak. And Virginia Tech was a good program. They'd make the postseason every year. And I remember one time and I remember this game because actually it was sold out, 10,000 people in Castle for Tech women's game against number 1 UConn. I remember the lights went out in Castle. There were those old sodium-type lights, and it took them 10 minutes to turn back on. And they'd slowly come back on, so the arena would slowly get brighter.
Right.
But at any rate, Tech lost that game by 9. And the women's team got a standing ovation when they left the court for losing by 9. Because it was an accomplishment to not get crushed by UConn.
Yeah.
I mean, there were other games where UConn would beat Tech by 30 or 40, and Tech was an NCAA tournament team. It's just UConn just steamrolled everybody, and there was no parity in the sport at all. So now it's more entertaining these days. Virginia Tech, NC State, number 3 team in the country. Well, 15 years ago, the number 3 women's team in the country would just be running roughshot over
even a top 10
Oh,
team.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
parity, like you said, it's come a long way. And just to see, I mean, even in the ACC, there are 5 or 6 top 25 teams. NC State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech. I mean, those are 5 really good teams. And that doesn't even include, some of the middle of the pack teams that can win games.
You got Notre Dame knocking on the door, too.
I forgot about Notre Dame.
As well.
That's 6. And 6 really, really quality teams in the ACC, and it used to be, I mean, even just a couple of years ago, Virginia Tech, it shows how far Virginia Tech has come. I mean, there were games a couple of years ago where Virginia Tech would host NC State or host Louisville or, even Florida State, who's fallen off a little bit, and lose by 10, 15, even if they were winning at some point during the game. And now Virginia Tech is winning those games. So Virginia Tech, I think, is a little bit part of that parity.
Absolutely.
And the Hokies, if they can get that regional hosting in Blacksburg, I'm just looking at their home record. 11-1 overall, the only loss coming to a top 15 Tennessee team back in December. 7-0 in the ACC. You would think there's a chance that goes away on Sunday against NC State, but could be 9-0 at home against ACC opponents. Getting that top 4 seed would be huge. Tech obviously very comfortable playing in Blacksburg.
Yeah, and I think Will and I had this discussion, I think last week when we were talking just, who knows what an NCAA tournament regional here would look like. Mm-hmm. But I think it would draw pretty solid.
It's happened once before.
Witherspoon.
Yeah, it was even after that.
Yeah, but that was a wild environment for them. My parents talk about that a lot.
And I don't remember what the process was back then. Like, I don't think Tech was a 4 seed the year I'm thinking of when they hosted. I think it might have been a bid thing.
Yeah. I think it probably used to be a bid because that's how it is.
Because I want to say Tech ended up like getting knocked out by Penn State in the second round, and Penn State was like a 2 seed or something like that. But Tech hosted because they outbid Penn State. Yeah. Which is kind of silly, but
yeah. Well, I mean that's how it kind of is for the NITs and stuff. You have to bid, but I mean, playing at home, not having to travel, getting to, and of course this is coming after, kind of crazy to think, but this is coming after a year where both the men's and the women's played in the bubble. Mm-hmm. One in San Antonio, one in Indianapolis, and now Virginia Tech might have a chance to host 3 regional games and potentially play in 2 of them in Blacksburg and Castle Coliseum. That would be pretty cool.
And a big weekend coming up for the Hokies. Winning both those games, you'd think gives them a pretty good shot. And then a week from today, the ACC women's basketball tournament opens up in Greensboro. Should be a lot of fun there. Hokies hoping they don't have to play until Friday. Let's check in on the Diamond Sports. We'll start with softball. They went down to Tuscaloosa this weekend, and you have to say it was a good weekend for this team. They got 3 wins. Their only 2 losses to number 2 Alabama. Combined score of 3-0.
And you actually move up in the rankings.
Yes,
you lose 2 games and
move
move
up
in the rankings.
Yeah. It was great pitching from the Hokies. Keely Rochard and Emma Lemley both had great outings against Alabama. Alabama's pitchers just had better outings. Montana Fouts.
She's the best pitcher in this country.
I believe 11 strikeout shutout of the Hokies on Friday night, and then Hokies taking a 0-0 score into the bottom of the 6th inning against the Crimson Tide on Saturday, and just came up short, giving up 2 in the bottom of the 6th. But again, they went toe-to-toe with the number 2 team in the country. It should show that this team could be in the Women's College World Series at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think they showed that they have a little more pitching depth this year, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, it's like Keely's going to pitch every single inning in games like that, without a doubt. But they have more depth this year, and that'll save. I don't know a lot about protecting arms in softball, but I guess theoretically speaking, it would save a little wear and tear on Keely.
Yeah,
and you can. And those younger pitchers will add experience throughout the course of the season because they'll be given more opportunities. So I think Tech is in a better position to make a deeper run this year. Not that they didn't make a deep run last year, but they need timely hitting.
But the
pitching's going to be there. They're going to need time to hit. Like when they have the bases loaded with nobody out.
Yeah,
they have to score one.
Yeah, Tech out hit Bama in that second game, and Keely Rochard and Emma Lemley, Emma Lemley is a stud. They are. That duo, I think it's probably the best pitching duo in the ACC. And, some teams, like Duke's got Peyton St. George, Clemson's got Valerie Cagle, Florida State and Notre Dame are both pretty good, but Virginia Tech's now got 2 aces. And that's how all of the, really, really, really good College World Series teams do it. Mm-hmm. You see maybe a little bit with a team like JMU last year who had their run. But if Virginia Tech if Emma Lemley can continue to develop and Keely Rochard can, obviously she's going to be Tech's number 1 option, but, rest a little bit. Like, I think, I don't know, softball's a bit different from baseball where, you can throw a lot of softball pitches and be all right.
Right.
But for example, host Radford. Tech was supposed to host Radford today. It got rained out. But you don't need to throw Keely Rochard.
No, you absolutely
don't. You can save her up for the weekend where they play South Carolina, Troy, Ohio State, South Carolina, some really, really talented teams. And this Virginia Tech team, Keely Rochard and Emma Lemley, I think held Alabama to they hit 183 over the weekend or 136 or something like
yeah,
that.
That's impressive.
And struck out 18 batters, only allowed 3 runs.
But those games could have gone either way.
Yeah.
It was like the second game when Tech had the bases loaded with nobody out. Losing that game 2-0 was kind of like losing to UNC in basketball, where you actually have more opportunities than the other team, but you still lose.
Yeah,
Alabama just hitting a 2-run homer, bottom 6, and then it's like Tech has one shot to make up 2 runs against one of the best pitchers in the entire country.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen very often.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if you expect your hitting, expect your batters to, like your pitchers would. Your pitchers can find a rhythm early and get into it.
Mm-hmm.
It might take your batters a week or two,
Sure.
To try to kind of figure it out. But I mean, if Virginia Tech can get timely hitting, this is a College World Series team, and I mean, Tech is very, very good. And a lot of it goes back to, we knew how good Tech's batters were going to be, and we knew how good Keely Richard was going to be. But the emergence of Emma Lemley, I think, is kind of this propelling force where if Virginia Tech can go into weekends where Keely Richard doesn't have to pitch, you play Duke in a 3-game series at home, you don't have to pitch Keely Richard in every single game. You can give Keely a rest. Mm-hmm. And that's something Virginia Tech didn't have before.
Yeah, Keely Richard basically was having to pitch 2 full games in a weekend and then come in to finish it off if necessary in the other one.
And it's not even just about the physical rest. It's also a mental rest.
Yeah.
Knowing that, you are the difference between victory and defeat. There's not quite that much mental pressure on her this year.
You saw in the UCLA series last season, Keely came out guns blazing in game 1. They get game 1, and then you run her into the ground the next 2 games.
She knows the next 2 games. I have to do the exact same thing for 2 more days.
And they've already seen her once.
Right.
Yeah, now exactly. If you get it into the super regionals again, and have that same scenario. Day 2, UCLA throws somebody different, but you also throw somebody different. Mm-hmm. Throw somebody that can do the exact same thing Keely Richard did the day before. I think that's, that is really, that's what's going to get Tech, that's what Tech's going to ride, basically.
A chance to get into the College World Series. And again, in that way, you have Lemley throw game 2 in the Super Regional. Even if you lose that, now you've got a fresh Keely coming back for game 3 to try and finish that one off. I want to talk about, obviously, the Alabama games are going to get all the headlines, but gutsy win over Middle Tennessee on Friday night. You have to turn around right after losing a 1-0 duel to Alabama and immediately play Middle Tennessee and then come up huge.
It was a walk-off, right?
It was a walk-off 2-run homer from Virginia Tech. You need that to beat those teams even after such an emotional loss against Alabama. I thought that was kind of the moment of the weekend for the Hokies.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, they beat Evansville pretty handily. Yeah. This was a really solid weekend. Obviously, it stinks to beat Alabama, but to show that, you have that mental capability to process, and move on and still play really, really good ball game. I mean, I think that's important, and especially because that probably would have been a really bad loss if Tech had lost that game.
Yeah.
But to show that you can walk it off and win in the late stages of games after you just lost a really close game, really heartbreaking game a couple hours earlier, that's really good.
And you're not going to play perfect ball every game,
No.
so you got to show some toughness down the stretch and come out with some nail biters like that.
And I think it has to give the Hokies confidence. They just went toe-to-toe with number 2 in the country for 2 straight days. If that comes up again in the College World Series or in the Super Regional, I think they're going to be ready to roll.
So really, if you think about the most recent games this team has played, they go toe-to-toe with Alabama, and then at the end of last season, they go toe-to-toe
with
UCLA.
Probably two of, if not the 2 most premier teams in all of college softball.
Yeah, and you've got, and this is a team that had 5 games in Florida last weekend,
all against Power 5 teams,
3 against ranked teams, and swept them.
Yep.
Tech is approaching that upper echelon of softball.
Right, and the key will be, is Keely's a senior?
Yeah. This is Keely's 5th year.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So the key is going to be maintaining the momentum when she leaves, because that's what Tech failed to do when they had Angela Tincher, who was dominant. I mean, she was great. And Tech went to the World Series with Tincher. But they didn't accumulate talent around her and continue the momentum, and that program just sort of slid back to the norm. Like, they weren't bad, but they were never that good again either. So it's going to be very important, and I think they will, because I think Tech has a bigger name now in softball and better facilities than they had then. So the future, there's more of a chance of future success. But yeah, they've got to make sure, and not that the next Keeley has to be absolutely as good as Keeley, but the program has to continue that upward trajectory.
But I think it's across the board too. I mean,
Yeah.
they've got some talented players like Kelsey Bennett. I believe
Yeah.
she's going to graduate after this year. They've got some veterans that have been there a while, and it's replenishing that depth. Because Tech's got a lot of depth this year.
Yeah, and Pete Demore has just done a great job turning this thing around in 4 years. This is his fourth year, and already probably a College World Series favorite at this point. If you're top 7, that would put you in right now if chalk rolls. But let's quickly touch on baseball before we get into the YouTube chat. John Sheff in his 5th year with the Hokies. Tough end to last year, lost a lot of key pieces, but a 3-0 start against UNC Asheville this weekend. Starting pitching, you lost all 3 weekend starters in the offseason, in Chris Gerard, Anthony Simonelli, and Peyton Alford. And you bring in your 3 starting pitchers this year, including a true freshman, 15 innings pitched, 4 hits, no earned runs, 17 strikeouts.
Tech baseball recently seems to be a story of missed opportunities. Like, I thought they had a chance to have a good team the COVID year, and COVID nixed the rest of that season. I mean, they had, a second-round pick pitching for them. Their battery was really good that year. And then last year, I think they had 3 good starters, but they could only pitch them all together for like 2 or 3 series.
A lot of injuries.
There was a lot of injuries to them. So, like, you had so many pitchers changing roles, whether it's, this guy's normally your long relief guy, now he's starting, and that pushes, and this guy's getting pushed to the close role and things like that. And it's been unfortunate, because I think the pieces have been there, but they haven't been able to play all their pieces together.
Yeah.
So this is a good start to the season, because all 3 starters pitched well, and that was the main concern. I think I think Tech will be able to score. Generally speaking, Tech is a good enough offensive team. But the question is always pitching depth. And UNC Asheville is not good competition. Let's go ahead and throw that out there. But if you told me before the season that the 3 starters would all go 5 innings, that they would all allow
no earned runs.
Exactly, no earned runs. I would have said, I will take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, and 2 of those guys, I mean, we've obviously seen what Ryan Okuda can do before, but Griffin Green, I mean, this was his first time in the spotlight. Opening day starter was fantastic. And then Drew Hackenberg, true freshman, first ever start, brother Christian Hackenberg, former Penn State quarterback. He's got a lot of family lineage in athletics, but he came out and played really well on Sunday.
He retired the first 9 batters he faced.
I mean, and pitching depth is obviously going to be key down the stretch, but Tech returned a lot of arms from last season. I mean, I think
just not their starters.
Yeah,
you lose your 3 starters.
A lot of
Shane
relievers. A lot of relievers.
Your closer, but almost everybody else is back.
Yeah, I mean, and we know how much talent Tech has batting wise. I mean, Gavin Cross didn't even play. He played opening day?
He
didn't
played
even
opening
play
day.
The last 2.
Per our Chris Hiron's little wrist tightness.
Wrist tightness.
Doesn't seem to be a major concern.
But okay, so you're without the best player, maybe the best player in the ACC.
I mean, he's going to be a top 10 pick possibly in the MLB draft.
Yeah,
this may be the best player in program history.
Yeah.
And opening weekend, we know Tech's got a lot of talent out there, and Tech hit well. And then the question, like Chris said, is pitching. And Tech's relievers looked pretty good too. The question is, can you continue to be consistent there? But, I mean, that's why you play these early season games. Obviously, yesterday against ETSU got rained out, but that would have been a nice test. But what did you say, Fordham this weekend?
Fordham this weekend, and then I believe High Point next week.
And then Wright State.
And then Wright State, who I believe beat Tennessee in a regional last year.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot of good tests, and it all I think the biggest question is going to be, what's that pitching consistency look like? Griffin Green looked really good, but can he keep
it going against better competition?
Yeah.
I think on the offensive side, we talked about it looks good. You got Gavin Cross. You got a guy like Nick Biddison who's finally healthy this year. But the young guys,
Carson
too.
DiMartini.
Tanner Schobel and Jack
Oh.
Hurley coming back after good freshman season. Carson DiMartini,
First pitch of your career. I saw that home run. And he crushed it. too.
400 feet to center
And,
field.
and it was such a weird, windy day too. Like I was outside for a little bit, and it seems like 1 second the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour in this direction, and the next it's blowing 20 miles an hour in that direction. You have no idea what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But he put his out to pretty much center field.
Yep.
And then hit a 3-run homer the next day, right?
Yep.
So that's you don't see that type of play from freshmen. Right?
And he played pretty well at their base. I mean,
Right.
he
He had one error on Sunday, but besides that, he was solid.
Yeah, and I mean, this is he's obviously not going to. A true freshman's not going to be perfect.
You're going to
but-
have some mistakes.
Third base defense has been an issue for Virginia Tech.
Yes.
Yeah, and to throw a freshman in there and he hits well, and for the most part, minus one error, he plays really good defense. I mean, that's about all you can ask for. And obviously, the pieces are going to change and move around during the season
Right.
due to injuries and stuff. But I mean, this looks like it's a young group, but a talented one.
Yeah, and we have to remember that Tech was starting a number of freshmen last year. I think I remember going to a Florida State game last year. It was a game Tech won, and I want to say like 8 of their 9 starters were freshmen.
Yeah.
And there was no scouting report on those guys early in the season because they're all freshmen. And I think that's one of the reasons they struggled down the stretch is because at that point the scouting report is out and you know how to pitch guys and you have to adjust to the pitcher's adjustments at that point. And that's tough on freshmen. So for the young guys we're talking about right now, they might run into some of the same issues. But for a guy like Jack Hurley, who's now been there.
Yeah. And Tanner Schobel coming back too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
hopefully a guy like Nick Biddison can start to find his form.
Yeah.
he had 3 hits on Saturday, including a home run. And I think you know these names: Biddison, Cross, Hurley, Schobel, even now DiMartini. But some other guys, Eduardo Malinowski had 5 RBIs on Friday, including a 3-run homer. Cade Hunter, 4 for 4, 2 home runs, 2 doubles, 5 RBIs in his debut.
Yeah.
And
that's a guy that was hurt last season and missed the end of last season.
well, and Coach Sheff said on Saturday that he was a game time decision up until basically the lineup cards were due on Friday, decided to play, and then went 4 for 4. So I think that might be the key for this team. Maybe not the guys who you know, but maybe the guys who you don't know stepping up as well.
I think that's the
Yeah.
key for any team. Because especially like when you get into like conference play, you get into extra inning games and things like that, and you have to make defensive replacements and
Make sure there's no drop off.
exactly. And if you have to adjust your lineup a little bit based on whether you're facing a lefty or a righty, I definitely think a bench is key to any good team. Unfortunately, we won't get to see it anymore, but particularly like in National League Baseball,
Yeah.
I know that's not. Obviously, there's a DH in college baseball, but I think there are so many times baseball season is so long that you're going to need your bench. It's like soccer; you're going to need your bench.
Yeah. You can't roll out. I mean, it's the same thing in a lot of professional sports. Same thing with the NBA.
Yeah.
Same thing with MLB. You can't play the same guys every single, and they're going to be injuries.
You're going to need a backup to come up with a big hitting performance one day. You're going to need a backup to hit a key 3-pointer for you, or in the case of Sean Padula versus Florida State, score 20 points. You need that depth. It's very rare that you're going to sustain success over the entire season with just your same starters every single game.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Tech's pitchers perform once it gets into tougher competition. Because, like Chris said, UNC Asheville's not winning the Big South.
They were
this year.
picked 9th in the Big South in the preseason
out
poll,
of
so
10
out of 11.
teams. Out of 11 teams.
So definitely not great competition. Fordham a little bit better this weekend, so we'll see how the Hokies respond to that. It was supposed to be the first 12 games, but now, since the rain out last night, first 11 games for Virginia Tech are at home.
Which is really interesting. They're playing all these home games at like when you would think the weather would be bad.
Yeah.
And the weather was not good this past weekend. It's too bad they're not playing a game today because it's really nice.
It's a little bit warm, no rain in the forecast, so hopefully that carries over to this weekend. I know there's a little rain on Friday possibly, but if you're in the area, go out to English Field. Should be some fun baseball this weekend. With that, let's check in on the YouTube chat. Nick, any good questions in there today?
There's not a single question. I'm not gonna lie to you.
No questions.
No
today.
questions
Wow.
today.
Any good comments?
Brent Pry interview was very good.
Great.
Scott Gluster threw in a few stats. Virginia Tech in men's basketball is 5-12 in their last regular season game since being in the ACC.
Oh, that's good to know.
And then, it gets better.
At least
in the
Clemson's
last
right now.
Clemson.
in the last 4 games of the regular season since joining the ACC, they're 29-39.
Great.
and
Thanks, Scott.
and the
Scott
only
bringing
time
us all up on this Wednesday morning.
the only time Virginia Tech won their last 4 regular season games during that span was 2016,
Okay.
and that was the
And-
beginning of the
The buzz
The run.
takeoff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They made the NIT that year. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, at least that's something good to end on there after some bummer stats from Scott Glessner.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Thanks, Scott.
I think you know what.
No. The thing is that 29-39 record that was against the old ACC back when the ACC was good.
good.
Now
And that
it's not
also
so
And
good.
you've got the I don't want to call out James Johnson, but
The James Johnson
right.
era.
James Johnson era is in there too.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come down to kind of what Chris we were just talking about with baseball depth.
Yeah.
Is Virginia Tech's bench going to be able to continue to produce? Darius Maddox was pretty good over the weekend. David Gasson, Sean Padula, those guys having roles and continuing to help Tech emerge, because Virginia Tech's not going to be able to win and go on a run if it's just 5 guys.
Agreed.
There is a question.
We have a question now.
Yeah,
Right.
and this is targeted to you, Mr. Coleman. Virginia Tech's men's basketball often doesn't look as muscular as their ACC opponents. You know where this is going.
Yeah.
Muscle alone doesn't win games at the ACC, but what do we know about the quality of men's basketball strength and conditioning?
Oh, it's great. It's Dave Jackson, the same guy who's put guys like Ahmed Hill and Nikhil Alexander Walker,
Sticks.
guys who really look the part.
Yeah.
Out there.
They were sticks when they came in.
Dave Jackson was longtime strength and conditioning coach. I guess he was strength coach probably under Greenberg.
Yeah.
And stayed all those years and was here under Buzz. Buzz took him to Texas A&M for 1 year.
And then he came back.
And then he came back. He got one heck of a good offer to come back. And I think Tech has a great strength and conditioning coach. I think, you look at individual players. Gasson's still skinny. Darius Maddox is still skinny. But they've still got time.
John Ojiako is the one that I like.
Oh,
to
yeah,
see
yeah. And
the last 3
you
years.
do have to remember is when those guys first enrolled, like Gasson and Maddox, they first enrolled last year. And you remember they were not allowed to work out and stuff because of COVID when they first got here, or at least not to the extent that they're normally allowed. So they're a little bit behind from that standpoint. I think guys I think Couture, if you see Couture in person, Couture looks more like an outside wide receiver. Or how an outside receiver is supposed to look.
Yeah.
So I think he's fine. Keve could probably be a little more ripped, I would say. But I think his strength.
I think overall it's pretty good. And you think about injuries.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, Virginia Tech. Who has Virginia Tech had injured since Justin Robinson? That Sweet 16
Lord,
year.
David, just
it's
not even real wood, but not.
But you think, Jalen Cone missed a couple games at the beginning of last year.
He got hurt.
He missed the
It was
majority
actually
of
in
the
the ACC portion of the schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he missed the first couple games of the season and then came back, and but and John Ojiako missed a little bit of time, but very few. And I think that just goes to show you that the guys are healthy and the guys are I think they look pretty good for the most part. I think a guy like Hunter Couture has become more physical.
His strength is impressive. His own ball defense.
Yeah.
Guys try to go through him, and he's very good at being physical without fouling.
Yeah, just playing straight up.
Yeah.
There is one possession in the UNC game. Baycott caught it about midway in the lane, and Aluma just stood up, and Baycott just tried to ramrod him, and Baycott went nowhere.
Right.
And the student section just erupted
I
because
remember
he kicked. He had to pass out. And I was like, okay, Aluma, you're finally starting to show it there, man.
Yeah, and development of guys like Sean Padula, him continuing to get better, or bigger, more muscular, I think that's going to be key.
For sure.
That was a good question. Who was that from?
That was from Jay Grimm. Also, if you go to the Louisville game, it's going to sound like a weird thing to do, but look at Hunter Couture's legs. They are tree trunks. I promise you.
Everybody write that down.
Yeah, write it down. Look at Hunter Couture's legs.
Well, it's hard to tell because he wears the
he wears
all the way down to his ankles. Yeah.
You've got 6 days to prepare. Write that down. Look at Hunter Couture's
Bring
legs.
binoculars.
All right. Well, thank you for the YouTube chat. Scott Glessner with some good stats in there. Jay Grimm with the question. Thank you, Nick, for sorting through that for us.
Of course.
Before we get out of here, David, Chris, what's coming up on Tech Sideline over the next few days?
We'll have our normal Friday Q&A. I've got to come up with something tomorrow. I'm not really sure. I think I've said pretty much all I have to say. I mean,
about basketball?
Yeah, I mean, David wrote a good article about it yesterday. I guess I could go in depth on some stats maybe, but like everybody knows we shot poorly against UNC.
Yeah,
I've got to come up
that's the
with
toughest
something.
thing. It's Tech shot bad. Tech didn't shoot well. That's the reason why
There's
Tech
not really
lost.
much analysis
Yeah,
there.
I know.
It's they shot bad, they lost.
I guess I could do inside the numbers, the top 10 worst shooting performances in Tech history, but nobody wants to read that, right?
Just bring everybody down. Well, big game tonight, Georgia Tech in Atlanta, 9 p.m. on the ACC network. And again, we're talking about it kind of as an at-large elimination game for Virginia Tech. You win, you get to keep on playing, trying to get that at-large bid. You lose, it becomes more and more likely you've got to end up raising the trophy in Brooklyn to get into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'll obviously have coverage from that. Women's basketball game tomorrow. Chris Hirons will have coverage from that. Big weekend in everything.
Baseball this weekend.
Baseball, softball, men's basketball, women's basketball.
Women's golf.
Lacrosse today, 3 o'clock. And then
wrestling is off until
wrestling's
the
off
ACC
till
championships.
the ACC championships.
Right?
That's next weekend.
We didn't even mention that. Tough weekend for wrestling.
Yes, lost to NC State on Sunday.
Beat UVA.
UVA. So technically, in ACC dual meets, they went undefeated in the meets they wrestled in, if we're going to be technical about it. But yes, again, big weekend. Baseball all weekend long. Men's basketball is in Miami on Saturday. Women's basketball Sunday, NC State. That one's at home. Lacrosse opens up their ACC slate against Louisville on Saturday, so a lot to look forward to across Virginia Tech athletics this weekend. I want to thank everybody on set. David filling in as Will Stewart is out today. He's questionable for next week. We should have him back. At the Real D Cunha, managing editor for Tech Sideline. Chris Coleman, to my right, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline at Chris Coleman TSL on Twitter. Nick Brown, great job in the fourth chair today with some insights and some looks at maybe some sports that we don't talk enough about. He's at Nick Brown 33 on Twitter. Malcolm Stewart does a great job behind the scenes, as always, as our producer, and I'm your host, Jay Kleiman. Enjoy the game tonight, Hokies fans. We'll see you next time.